So one thing that I will say too, though, is that I'm glad we got a small group, really intimate, because this will allow you guys to ask really any questions that you want. And feel free to speak up or stop me midway. You are more than welcome to unmute yourself at any time. If you have questions, you can either unmute yourself and just kind of pause in the middle, or you are welcome to raise your hand. The features are kind of below this screen. You have your mic, your camera, and then a little bit over that, you have a little hand that looks like this. You want to raise your hand, you are more than welcome to do so and ask any questions along the way. Okay. So a little bit about me as we get started. So hi, everyone. My name is Rachel. I am the founder and CEO of Business Foundations. So we are a business support services company. That means that we essentially help people achieve more and stress less in the process. So our services range from virtual assistants to project management on the more complex side. We work a lot of times with small businesses and nonprofits. The main reason why I wanted to give this presentation, I do these quite a bit in larger settings or in events with other businesses or other nonprofits and present to their people. But really, just in thinking about the times that we live in now, there's a lot of funding that's been made available to people, whether that's Black people, white people, whatever. Now, I will say for Black people, I do think that is a lot of funding that's been made available, more than has been historically, which is absolutely amazing. But just because the funding has been made available to us doesn't necessarily mean that we know how to get the funding. There's a lot of there's just a lot of information to be had about what makes for a good application for funding, or what makes for just a good bid, you know? And so that's why I was like, well, let me just go ahead and present this information that I've already done quite a bit to make it available just to more people, because it's really important. So again, that's why I'm recording this. That's why I'm just making this live, because it's essential, right? Like, who doesn't want more money for their stuff, right? So before we get started, also just want to set a couple pretexts for you. And actually, we'll do it like this. Like I said, since it's a pretty small group, name one thing or one question that any funder might have, regardless of who they are. So like, what's one question that you might get from a bank and a grant writer or a grantor? What might you get? Let me see what you guys got in the comments. How much do you need? Yes, I love that. Bernie, you got one? What are your sales? Yes. What are your sales and how much funding do you need, right? So things like this is what we're going to be talking about today. Really just what are those overlapping questions? Because it's all the same thing. And we're just having such a great time today. All of my stuff is just gone. Even whenever you do the preparation, sometimes stuff just happens, but that's okay, guys. So we'll just go off the cuff. Yeah. So the number one thing that you're going to need to know, when it comes to the 6 degrees of separation between you and funding, the concept of the 6 degrees of separation, that actually comes from a play or a movie. Have you guys seen that one? Type in the comments. Let me know if you've seen it. The 6 degrees of separation. It was originally a play. Well, it was originally like a concept. Then it got turned into a play. And then it got turned into a movie. Oh my gosh, you guys have to check it out. I'm a big movie buff, so I like just whatever, stuff like that. I think it came out in the mid 90s or the early 2000s. But it has Will Smith in it. And I was like, what is Will Smith doing in this movie? And just a little bit of background. So this will even help us in understanding like what this means, the 6 degrees of separation between you and your funding. The whole premise of the concept of the 6 degrees of separation is that there is only 6 people in the world that separate you from anyone in the world. So it's 6 degrees of separation between you and funding, 6 degrees of separation between you and me, between you and the president, between you and whoever. It's like, if I know person number 1, 2, 3, 4, and 5, if I can make those connections and I can get to the end person. So the whole premise of the movie, or the premise of the play, what it was originally, is that you had Will Smith playing this character, and he was basically just making these connections. And so his thing was, he was lying. He was a thief in the movie in the end. But his whole thing is like, you can only have 6 or 7 contacts. So he was actually making up stories. He didn't actually even know the people in between that he was trying to get into contact with. But it was the fact that, oh, if I can say that I know this person's son, and we went to this school together because I know this person, then I can get into their house and like all this stuff. So when it comes to the 6 degrees of separation between you and funding, what we want to look at is, okay, what is it going to take for me to actually get to the money? So sometimes it's not like, not always about the people. Sometimes it's just about, okay, what do these people want to know from me? What is it that they need from me to be able to get what they need to get done? So the next, sorry guys, I am just having a blast with this technology today. Now ask me how many times I've actually had issues with this prior to, it would be 0. But it's those days, right? So the first step that you want to know in making those connections is getting the funding. Is that people are going to be asking the same questions. It doesn't matter whether they are, again, a bank or a grantor or whoever. They're going to have the same questions regardless. And so what we need to do is be positioning ourselves to actually receive that money. The second thing that we would need to know in the 6 degrees of separation is to actually document everything. So, and put everything in one place. So a big problem that I've seen in working with other businesses and doing, whether it's doing their virtual assistants or working with them on a grant, what have you, is people can have a business plan that's super detailed and that's great, or they have nothing at all, right? So it's either, I've seen both extremes where they have the super detailed business plan, or they're just like, oh yeah, I know what my business description is in my head, or I know what this is in my head, and they expect me, a virtual assistant, or my team, virtual assistants, to extract that information from either place. Now, a business plan is obviously a little bit easier to pull from, but having it in your head is not. So really one of the second thing that you need to do. So number 1 is making sure that you acknowledge that there is a connection between all of these things. Number 2 is making sure that you have a designated location for where this information is supposed to be. So whether you have a business plan, now you shouldn't be having nothing at all. You should be having something somewhere. And that can be just Google Drive. I'm a big proponent of like Google and Google Workspaces and things like that. Not only is it free, but it can be accessed anywhere that you have internet access. You can access something on Google, but you can use Google, you can use Dropbox, you can use whatever. But those things are really important because well, I'll get into that a little bit later on down the line, but it's really important on the surface level to have access to that information at any point in time, because at any point in time, you might need to access it. If you have done any grant searching or just funding searching before, you probably know that you have looked up or you've been going about your daily business, and then somebody has emailed you, hey, there's this grant available, hey, there's this funding available, hey, there's this loan available. And suddenly it's like you kind of have to drop what you're doing a little bit to go and start working on that. But if you don't have your things in place, you're going to go for more than one funding source, right? So you're going to apply for more than one grant in the lifetime of your business. You're going to apply for more than one loan in the life of your business. So rather than trying to redo that information every time it comes about, or even trying to pull it from something like a business plan, have it in one space where you can say, oh, got it. Oh, I know it's coming. Oh, yep, got it. Can go straight to it, rather than having to pull all those things from those different places. So the second thing that you want to keep on or keep in mind when it comes to those degrees between you and funding is by actually putting all of your information into one place. That is super important, hands down, and it's absolutely necessary. Number 3, and the reason why I'm going off the cut, like I had a whole PowerPoint for you guys, and I'm still looking for the PowerPoint, and like it's gone. We're just gonna figure it out. I had like 5 minutes. I was setting up the webinar, just making sure everything's good. And I've been checking everything for the last hour and a half before getting started to make sure that everything would start smoothly. And like 5 minutes before, it hit you with a reset. And like you got to reset the computer and do all the updates. So everything that I had like prepared and everything on the computer, it is now gone, but that's okay. So if I find it at some point in time, I'll definitely present it. But anyways, so you guys are welcome to, again, ask questions as I'm going through this, because I'm sure I'm probably leaving something out as I'm going. So the number 3 thing that you want to do, the number 3 degree of separation, is you want to remember that these people are here to help you. So whoever it is that you're working with to get said funding, that means that somebody went out of their way to allocate funding towards you, or towards your cause, towards your business, towards your whatever. So what that means is that they are looking for someone to come and take this money away from them. So a lot of the times when I've talked to people about funding, it's almost like it's this battle between them, and it's almost like it's this battle between the grantee and the grantor. And it's like, oh, they're trying to get, they're trying to get all this money, they're trying to do this. And so they feel like they have to go and jump through all these hoops to be able to get the funding that they want. But that's not necessarily the case. So what we want to do is say, hey, somebody has set aside this money for me, so let me do what I need to do to actually get the funding. And that may be, and that's so simple, but the big like twist in that is actually reaching out to the funder and communicating with them and asking them questions. So again, if it's a bank, calling the loan officer. Hey, I'm considering getting ready to apply. I kind of have a couple things in order, but I wanted to know, is there anything in particular that you need from me outside of the basics? Is there anything that would stick out to you as extremely important that I need to make sure that I'm including, things like that? They will answer those questions for you. But it's a matter of, and what that does too, that alerts them to, oh, there's someone who's serious about getting this money. There's someone who's staying on top of this. Let me keep an eye out. There's there's a whole lot of things as far as making sure that there's not bias, but it's just like, oh, let me keep an eye out for this person who is clearly demonstrating responsibility, who is clearly demonstrating being on top of their game. So acknowledging, like point number 3 is acknowledging the fact that there's funding that has been set aside for you by someone. Reach out to that person, reach out to that entity and ask questions. Now, there will be, depending on the type of funding that there is too, there might be some, not hoops, but some people might just have the rule of, oh, well, please don't email us with any questions. I know the MBDA, the Minority Business Development Authority, or agency, they had a grant out and they were saying, please don't email us with questions. Sometimes that can occur. Even then, it is possible. A lot of places, especially when it's a grant as opposed to a loan, they will actually post people who have won this money previously or just won money from them previously. So it doesn't hurt to go on their website, see who's won money from them before, and then reach out to those people. Hey, do you know if there was anything that you got feedback from before that they said that you probably should have done, even though you won the money? Was there anything that they wanted to have been changed about your application? Doing things like that. And people are pretty open. And if the first person that you call isn't open, that's okay. Because like I said, they include a lot of their grantees in the information that they have online. So if the first person that you call isn't open, then call the next person. It's okay to do that. They have, again, that money is set aside for you. So it's totally fine. It's totally understandable and helpful for you to actually inquire about the money that's been set aside for you. The next point in that would be to mark your feedback. So I was just talking about inquiring about the feedback that others have gotten for their grants, for their loans, what have you. It is really important that as you are going through the funding seeking process, to mark down and apply the feedback that you're getting. One piece of feedback that I got for a really long time was that my business wasn't clear. People couldn't quite understand what it was that I did because we did a whole wide range of stuff. But for a long time too, my business was kind of 2 businesses in one, and that's a totally different story. Essentially, I was doing the virtual assistants, and then I was taking that money and then using it to purchase real estate because I knew that I didn't want to do virtual assistants forever. So I was just kind of dabbling in it too, which was fine for revenue purposes, for income purposes, but it was not fine for having a clear business description. It wasn't fine for having a clear business goal. If I were, I didn't go for a bank loan during that time, but if I were to go for one, it would have been the feedback of, no, we don't quite understand what you're doing. And when I did go for some grants or for some competitions during that time, it was, okay, we hear that you do this one thing. We hear that you have a law degree, but we don't understand how real estate comes into the mix, or we don't understand how the law degree comes into the mix. So it'd always be this, little bit of, I don't really know. So what I did was I took that feedback that I was consistently getting, and then once you start to document that feedback in the first place, then you'll start to notice patterns of feedback and then realize what your big strengths are, what the big things are that you need to work on. And then if those are the things that are blocking you from getting funding, then you can counteract those, because then you have a pattern of saying, this is this, and this is this, and then you can move on. So that's really important. What I ended up doing with mine to counteract the feedback that I was getting is I split the company into 2. I just split it into two different companies. And like, as the owner of both, I can do whatever I want to do with the funding from both, with the revenue from both companies. But on paper, it just made it that much easier for me to actually secure the funding, because then I could say, yes, this is clearly what we do. We clearly are virtual assistants and project managers over here. And over here, we clearly invest in a real estate. Like, it was two completely different things that had two completely different goals, two completely different outlines, but one same owner. But that just made it a lot easier for me to be able to actually secure that funding. So that's, a personal one for sure. I've seen it with other people, but if you are not marking down the feedback that you're getting, it's going to make it that much harder to know why you're not getting the funding that you're applying for. Now, sometimes, like, if it's MasterCard has something available, okay, there might be 50 billion people that are applying, so you may not get feedback, but that does not negate the opportunities that you do have for feedback, making sure that you're watching those, making sure that you're monitoring those things for feedback and actually improving on them in the future. So that's number one, is acknowledging that there is a connection between all of the things that you need, between whether it's a loan, whether it's a grant, whether it's an investor. Acknowledge that there's a connection. Again, I really like the comments that you guys made before. Like, instantly you were able to name things that, go in between those. Number two is make sure that you're keeping all of your documentation in one place. So that's going to make it easy to go to whenever you actually have access, or whenever you have, an opportunity arise for funding, you have clear access to it. Number three is making sure that the people that, like, these people want to give you money, and like communicating with them to make sure that you are going for that money properly. And then number four, I just did number four. I'm already forgetting it. So number four is making sure that you're documenting the feedback that you're getting along the way. So number five step between actually getting access to that funding is still that asking for help factor. But in this case, this is asking for help from the people around you. So this is so not necessarily going to the funder, but essentially, 86% of small businesses have no employees. So that means that 86% of the people who may qualify for a small business loan or a small business grant would be forced to choose between start working on this grant or keep doing the same work that you've been doing, like keep running your business. And like, then you're kind of spinning your wheels, right? It's like, well, if I had time to, write this grant or work on this grant, then I would have time to work on my business. Or, if I had time to work on this and I could do that, right? So you kind of end up spinning your wheels because you're just kind of robbing Peter to pay Paul as far as time goes. One of the best ways that I've learned to combat this, well, two of the best ways I've learned to combat this is, number one, when you are keeping your information in one place, like step number two, then you can reach out to, like, for me, it started with reaching out to a friend and saying, hey, friend, this grant has become available. I have all of my information in one place already. Can you go in and just fill out the basics for me? Can you just put it, whether it's on a document, whether it's online, and it's one of those, online applications where it's kind of a plug and play. Can you go in and just fill out the basics for me? And then I will come back and do the rest. That is what I had to do. I just had to start with a friend. Now I can say, okay, employee, can you go and do XYZ? Can you go in and plug in what's necessary? Or, independent contractor, can you go in and see what's helpful? So if you are, like I was, a solopreneur and you don't have anybody else, might just be a friend or family member and just saying, hey, like, this really awesome opportunity has come up. I already have my information here. Can you go in and fill out like this information for me? That is like crucial on saving time. And again, actually making sure that you're going to get access to that funding. Another way to do something like that would be to work with a virtual assistant and say, hey, your only job is to keep the lookout for grants and take care of the basics until I get there. Or you can, I'm proponent because we're a virtual assistant company, right? So I am a huge proponent for having a virtual assistant anyways that takes care of the day-to-day, the kind of, mundane task. So whenever opportunities do arise for funding, for just additional things, you already have a system of working with someone else to make sure that those sort of things don't fall through the cracks. So many times I've seen people have opportunities for funding available, but because they didn't have 1 through 5 taken care of, and obviously 1 through 6, right? Because it's the 6 steps. But because they didn't have that solid foundation and they didn't reach out to anyone to ask for help in doing it, right? Like thinking that we can handle it all on our own, or thinking that we can do XYZ all on our own because we're entrepreneurs, right? They missed the opportunity. They either drop the ball and they run out of time in actually getting it done, so they miss the deadline, or 2, they are so focused on just getting it in, just getting it done, just doing it between time, right? Not sitting down and focusing on that time and getting it done. They miss it. They just completely miss it, and they run out, or they're not giving their best to it, and they haven't given their best answers, or they haven't given their best information, or they're trying to pull it from their head, and they're definitely not giving their best information whenever they're applying for these things. And so it's like, well, what do you expect? And then it's like you kind of end up, because they're spinning their wheels so much, not only have you taken away time from to actually do the grant, and then you spin your wheels and then you don't get the money, but then you took away from time that you could have been working. So by reaching out and just asking someone else for help, that's going to save you time, and hopefully you have like either an employee or an independent contractor or a virtual assistant, like, or a personal assistant, somebody, or just like a really good friend, or your mom. My mom's helped me with stuff too sometimes. Like, you got to do what you got to do, right? So being able to reach out to those people and say, hey, I need help. I need like something, and just getting these basics filled out so that then you can really focus on what matters in the grant. And then number 6, whoo, guys, we are doing it. We are doing it all off the top of my head. I did not think I would be able to do this without any prompts, but hey, we're here and we're doing it. So, and oh yeah, let me just pause for a second. Does anybody have any questions as I'm going? Because I feel like I've been kind of running through this. I'm also going to take a sip of water, but put some questions in the comments if you have any, or just check in. Say, if you're doing good, let me know that you're doing good. Type good if you're doing good. If you're doing all right, type all right, and we'll go from there. We'll check on that. Okay, so we're doing good. Yay! Okay, so love that you guys are doing good. Love that. So number 6 is actually really kind of combining all the other steps, and then saying like, making time to actually go for the grants that you're going for, or loans, whatever the funding is. Take time to do that. one thing that I had to learn was that there's always going to be funding available. There's always going to be some investor. There's always going to be some loan with some bank. There's always going to be some program, whether it's a corporation or a government agency. There is always going to be money available. But I was really running a rat race myself, trying to keep up or like go for every grant that came down the pipeline. And it was like, okay, I didn't really have a plan for how to actually secure my funding. So number one, what I did is I took the time to create, I call it a funding fact sheet. So I took time to just create a funding fact sheet, and I just worked on it for a while. I went and I said, okay, what is it that, again, they're going to want to know, right? They're asking me, how much funding do I need? And all of these questions are the same. They're always the same. When you're talking about just the basics, right? We are business foundations, so we always work on our foundational things, but they're always going to ask those same questions. When did your business start? What is the name of your business? What is your business website? How many employees do you have? What is your business description? If I haven't already said that one, why do you need the funding? What are you going to do with it? How are we going to get our money back? All of the questions are going to be the same. Even some of the other questions like, are you a veteran? Are you this ethnicity? Whatever. By putting all of that information on my funding fact sheet, I have saved so much time. But it took the time to actually, it took me taking the time to actually put that information together. It took me saying, okay, you know what? I'm just going to set aside 1 hour per week to just focus on funding. And that doesn't mean that there's something coming down the pipeline. That doesn't even mean that there's a grant available at the time. That's just 1 hour a week to consider funding for my business, for my nonprofit, for whatever. That's saying, okay, regardless, I want to stay on top of my P's and Q's. So that's what sets aside the time for that. So then when there is time for funding available, so what is it, in February, I had the opportunity to go for this grant, and all of these things that I'm saying, like, that was it. That was exactly what we're doing. And because I took the time already to be looking into funding, I ended up finding the grant super last minute. Like, it started in February. I found out about it at the end of January. Now, the person that I was working with, the grant writer, they were like, oh, if it's available in February, it probably had about 6 months, of being available, or not being available, of, kind of giving warning that it was coming up or what have you. 6 months. And I didn't see it any of that time, but I saw it right before it was due, right before they actually opened it for submissions and everything. And so because I was consistently making myself available to consider funding, to look up funding, to whatever, prepare for funding, I was able to catch it right before it became available. I was able to get somebody, because I'm working on, asking for help, reaching out, who can say what. I've put in the time to work on my funding fact sheet over and over and just look at it and make sure that all the things are in order. And then I had someone who was working with me. So I was able to tell this person, now this grant in particular was extremely extensive, and there was still a lot of hard work that went into it outside of my funding fact sheet. But I was able to tell this person in advance, hey, this is where all of my information is. You can go to this particular spreadsheet. You can find every answer that's going to take care of the basics. I'm still working on my business, right? Like, I still have a business to run, so I can't just drop what I'm doing to work on this funding. But here's the basics of the information. While you're doing this, I'm going to take care of some things on the business. and then I'm going to be able to switch gears, and then I'm going to be able to come back and keep working on my funding. And that's exactly how it went. Was it still tough? Yes. Was there still a lot of questions? Yes. But because I had done the groundwork, I was able to come in and do what I needed to do and get everything done. So those are your 6 steps. So just going to do a recap, and then I want to open up really for some more Q&A, and then just some other tips for you guys as you're going through. So the number one thing that you want to do is just acknowledge that there's a connection between all funding resources, and make sure that you are having a solid foundation. Like, you can't build a house with a bad foundation. So make sure that you acknowledge that, it's not the end all be all to have your funding fact sheet, but you want to have a solid foundation in the funding that you're going for. So look for and acknowledge those connections between the different funding types. So number 1, acknowledge the connection between them all. Number 2, you want to acknowledge that they're going to ask a lot of the same questions, or no. Number 2 is that you want all of your information in the same place. And another word for this, depending on who you're working with. So I use a funding fact sheet. If you're talking to investors, it might be called a deal room. For grants, sometimes nonprofits refer to it as a funding kit. It really doesn't matter what you call it, but you need to make sure that you have all of your information in one spot. You don't need to be trying to pull from the top of your head, or even a super large document. Like, if your business plan is 100 pages, you need to narrow that down, because the employee that's working for you, they're not trying to skim through 100 pages to put through, to put out a grant, or to, put in your information for a grant. So number 1, acknowledge the connection. Number 2, put all of your information in one spot. Number 3, you want to be acknowledge the fact that somebody has set aside this money for you. So reach out to the grantee. Reach out to the grantor, reach out to the loan officer, reach out to whomever, the investor, and say, hey, like, you have allocated money towards me, towards my cause, towards what have you. So what can I do? What are you looking for from me to make sure that you're able to give me the money that you clearly want to give me? How can I help you help me? Right. Number 4 is so seeing, like, communicating with them, finding out what it is that they need from you. Number 4 is actually writing down the feedback that you get. So number 3 is more so a pre-text to getting funding. And then number 4 is after the fact, after you've put in the application, after you did or did not get the grant, writing that information down and then going from there. Number 5 is, what was number 5, y'all? Number 5 is actually asking for help, getting assistance in filling out your forms and your information, because people are going to be helping you in this process. So make sure that you are reaching out to them and saying, okay, what, can you just fill out this basics of information for me, so that I can follow up with the other things and then fill out the more detailed information. But like I mentioned before, 86% of the United States small business owners are solopreneurs. They have no employees. So I don't want you guys to leave this, webinar and be like, oh, I'm going to fill out all these grants, but then come back and now you've worn yourself out from applying for grants, but you haven't made any money, right? Because you just switched time on what you were working on. And then number 6 is having something like a funding fact sheet, that just has those basic questions that, again, are your foundational things, so that you can circle back to actually seeing, to actually having people help you out on that. Okay, so I see Miss Conway here has a comment. I've put in a few grant applications, but I don't get feedback. What are my thoughts on why that might be? That is a really good question, and I appreciate you asking that. I know that there are some grants, like one from the MBDA, and then there's one that I think is out right now that they haven't. I think it's like the SoGal grant or something like that. And both of them said that it was because of the high volume of grant applications that they knew that they were going to receive, that they said off the bat that they weren't planning on giving feedback. With those, if they say it from the jump, hey, you're not going to get feedback regardless, you just, I personally just kind of like take that and say, okay, I tried. But if they don't say that in the beginning, that they haven't given feedback, like maybe their response is just, hey, we've decided to go another route. Or maybe they call and say, hey, we couldn't do it, what have you. I would say ask right then, either email back. I like a phone call. So I would call and just say, hey, I totally understand that I didn't receive it, or I didn't receive the funding, but is there any, feedback that I could get on why, or, is there something that I could be looking at for the future to make sure that I actually get this funding? Does that make sense? And if you have a follow-up question to that, that's totally fine too. Okay, great. And yeah, at this point, I do want to just pause and just let you guys ask any questions, get feedback from you guys. Does this make sense? Are we good? And I want to, one other thing. So I know I asked you guys like your expectations prior to coming. And so I want to know, like, do you feel like you're getting these questions answered? And do you guys already have, do you have any of these things in place? Do you guys have a go-to person? That's something that I want to know. Do you have a go-to person for being able to access, grants? You do not. Yeah, you do. Okay. Love that. Love that you do. And I see, Courtney, you got here. Everything you stated is true. I was approved for a grant earlier this year and I learned a ton. Yay! Congratulations. And yeah, so Courtney's saying she sees like they really do ask those similar questions. So what I'm going to do is this. So I'm posting in here, and if you're streaming from elsewhere, if we did get this to stream on Facebook, we'll find out. And if not, I'll post this recording so you guys can have access to it. And I'll probably clip some stuff of me and my technical difficulties. I'll probably clip those out, but that's all right. But I wanted to post this in here. So there's a couple of things that I want to make sure that you guys have access to before we go. So the first thing is our funding fact sheet template. So I went ahead, so for business foundations, this is the fact sheet template that we use. This is our go-to. The only difference between what I am giving you guys in this and what we actually use is the fact that ours has our answers on it, like for our business. So for us, this piece of information is extremely vital. It's like, it's foundational. That's why we're business foundations, right? But it is extremely foundational to have something like a funding fact sheet. So I want you guys in the comment section, let me know if that link works. So you have access to that funding fact sheet template. That is of no charge. That is just because we want to make sure that you can get access to this information because it is so vital. It is so important. Okay, great. And it works. Sounds like it works. Perfect. And then number two, because I know there will be some people who attend, like Ms. Conway just mentioned, that, not everybody has a go-to person that they can reach out to, hey, I need help filling out this grant, or maybe I need help filling out my funding fact sheet. So we do not do this. We have never done this before. But I wanted to make available to you all. And I guess since we had the technical difficulties, I'll make it available to those on the recording. But we are making available for people to get assistance filling out their funding fact sheet. So our minimum virtual assistance is like $1,500 per month. So what we're doing, rather than saying a per month thing, is that we are helping people to fill out their funding fact sheet for $495. So, and that's a one-time fee. It's not a per month thing. So me or one of my team members, we actually come in, we talk with you about your business. We say what's going on, all that stuff. Now, this is not a consultation. This is not a strategy session. We are just here to help you make sure that you get your funding fact sheet filled out. And honestly, this is, again, I've already said how crucial it is to have your stuff in the same place, have your feedback written down. Like, this is the place where you put that information. This is the chance to do those things. So rather than, I know for me, I would get so tired of going to webinars where they would talk about oh, here, this is all you need to do to make your business better, or this is all you need to do to work on your nonprofit. But then they would be like, okay, so go do it. And I'm like, but when? When am I going to have time to do this when I've been busy running everything else in my life, running everything else in my business? Now, like I just mentioned, now I'm setting aside, at least an hour a week to be able to work on these sort of things. But it's still important to just say, hey, we don't want to just give you guys information. We don't want to just say, okay, here you go. Now, good luck and go do it. But also we acknowledge that, right? This is something to help get funding. That doesn't necessarily mean that the funding is there yet. So we are this is an exclusive offer. It's just for you guys, just for those who are watching this. So it is on the link that I just sent. And I'll put, like I said, for the recording, I'll put that link in the description below, because it's so important. It's so important, really, just y'all, we have got to get this money. We have got to get it. No one wants to be broke. So let's make our businesses thrive. Thank you. Yes, let's do it. Let's thrive, you guys. Because there's so much money out there. And so it's why not? And one of the other items on there, on that sheet, or on the post that I just did, on the link, that's what it's called, on the link that I just sent for you guys, one of the other things is this app, bank, what have you. It's called SoFi, and they just give $25 for signing up. It's basically making another little checkings account, whatever. But for signing up, you get $25. It's kind of like how they do the Cash App, refer a friend, you get X amount, refer a friend, you get X amount. And it's not a huge deal, but I just said, we're talking about business funding. We're talking about nonprofit funding. So have at it, get a little head start, make an account, right? Let's just get going. Let's do the things. Let's get the money. Because again, it's there, right? So I was here's some more money that's available. If you want it, you're welcome to it. So, and then the last thing on there is just a consultation with us, a quick discovery call. If you are interested in virtual business support services, again, we do everything from virtual assistance to project management. So we're available for that. If you have anything else, you're welcome to check out our website. But are there any other questions before we get ready to head out? All right. I don't see any questions, but thank you guys so much for attending. Whether you were able to tune in this way or you're watching the recording later, thank you guys so much for being here. I'm so glad to get this information out to y'all. Y'all don't even know. Like, it does my heart good just to know that there's like that this is now recorded, that more people are going to have access to funding now. Like, this helps me. So thank you guys so much for showing up. If you have any questions, please let me know. Again, if you didn't register, please do, because there's still going to be some other things, but I will send also a follow-up email to everyone who did register so that I can make sure that you've got, like, especially this web link that I posted in here, make sure that you have access to that. And if you have any other questions, like, reach out. Our address or our web address is www.webreathebusiness.com. And you can reach out to us at admin@webreathebusiness.com or info@webreathebusiness.com. And we'll get back with you. But that's all I got for you guys. And we are right at an hour. So thank you for attending. And you guys have an amazing evening. Bye, y'all.